Kia ora koutou, and welcome back to our session on walking for well-being. I'm Caroline McElnay and a member of the Living Streets Aotearoa Executive Council. Just a reminder to contact live support if you experience any technical issues, and post your questions for the live Q&A chats, which we'll be holding at the end of the complete session. So this session is on walking for well-being, and we have three great speakers: Anna Stevenson, Rosie Woods, and Antonia Malchik. First up is our speaker, Anna Stevenson. When we asked Anna, why does walking matter, she replied, solvitur ambulando, meaning it is solved by walking, attributed to various ancients, but often to St. Augustine. Anna is a public health medicine specialist, leading Health in All Policies Kaupapa at Waitaha National Public Health Service to Whatu Ora. She graduated from Auckland Medical School, trained and worked in general practice in a variety of locations around the country before specialising in public health medicine. Anna's work has focused around the determinants of health and well-being, including climate change and environmental sustainability, transport, alcohol harm minimisation, and urban design and planning. Her talk is Walking for Well-being, a Public Health Perspective. Thanks, Anna.
Kia ora koutou, ko Anna Stevenson tako ingoa. I thought I would start my presentation, Walking for Wellbeing, with a slide of me and two friends who are walking in one of the many, many beautiful parts of this amazing country that we are fortunate to live in. As it happens, all three of us in that photo are medically trained, and we're all very keen on not getting skin cancer. So you can see that reflected in our various approaches to keeping the sun off our skin. So ko wai-o, you can see a little bit about me in the middle of this slide. To the side there, you can see two photos from a really lovely holiday I was privileged to take in the city of Bologna in Italy earlier this year. That's my husband, and he is standing on the cobblestones of a 2,000-year-old Roman road between Bologna and Florence, and we were able to walk there over several days. And that's me at one of our many, many food stops that we made on our daily explores of the city of Bologna. And I'll come back to this trip a bit later in my talk. I wanted to introduce the concept of healthy life expectancy. I think most people are familiar with life expectancy. That is an average measure that takes in everything that happens to a person from the day that they're born, diseases, accidents, treatments, and it predicts how long you're likely to live from the time you're born. And you can see that New Zealand has been doing really well in life expectancy, and over the last 2 decades, life expectancy generally continues to increase for both men and for women. There's a difference between healthy life expectancy and life expectancy. Healthy life expectancy is the navy part of that graph, and that's the period of your life that you can expect to be well enough to do all the things that you want to do. And the teal part at the top of each bar represents the period of time that a person can expect to live in poor health before they die. And it might be a little bit hard to see, but what is the case is that in New Zealand, life expectancy is increasing faster than healthy life expectancy. And so you can see the teal bit on the top of those bars just ever so slightly widening. And what this means is that while people are living longer, they are also spending more of the last few years of their life in poor health. Now, this chart looks at men versus women, but I just wanted to show you this chart of life expectancy in New Zealand, which looks at Maori versus non-Maori in New Zealand. And once again, you can see that life expectancy is increasing nicely for everybody in the country, but you can also see that there is a very large gap between genders and also between ethnicities. The largest gap, of course, is between a Maori male who can expect to live 73.4 years and a non-Maori female who can expect to live just over 11 years longer. Now, this is a talk for another day, but I'm just slipping this in here to ensure that we don't forget this very important health inequity in our country. Now, this information and this infographic comes from a recently released Health and Independence report from the Ministry of Health in New Zealand. And it is the proportion of disability adjusted life years lost. And in New Zealand, we think that about 85% of those are from non-communicable diseases or chronic diseases. And this relates to that teal colour at the top of the bar graph in the top right of your slide. Now, chronic diseases don't just happen. There's a bit of a myth that as we get older, we get sicker. Ageing is indeed a risk factor for chronic diseases, but actually there's usually another cause. Infectious diseases is a really big risk factor for chronic disease, and I've starred all the different ones in this infographic that relates to. We're talking about things like influenza, COVID-19. So the less viral infections you can get, the healthier you're likely to remain. And there are other determinants of disease like diet, smoking, air quality, many things. And again, about 85% of our disability adjusted life is caused by these chronic diseases. Now, ageing, as I mentioned, is absolutely one of the big risk factors for ill health. And in New Zealand, ageing is happening quickly. There's no doubt that as we age, we do get more wear and tear, and more things in our bodies start to break down. You can see, according to this report from the Helen Clark Foundation a few weeks ago, that in about 25 years' time, we can expect that about 63%, almost 2/3 of all our public health services will be used by people in the middle of this bar graph, the orange colour there. So there's not going to be much of our health services left for everybody else. And it also suggests that our health services are going to be really compressed. It's no longer a nice to have to think about how can we keep ourselves healthy for longer. It's going to be increasingly necessary. Now, how are we going to do that? If we look at the top slide from this infographic, the cancer, 17% of the 85% is caused by cancers. And here you can see we have literally bucket loads of studies about the effect of exercise on the prevention of and the treatment of many different types of cancers. And when we're talking exercise, we're not talking about going to the gym for hours and hours every day or, hardcore climbing mountains. We're just talking about getting our heart rate up for half an hour a day, about 5 times a week. That's the recommended level of physical activity in this country. And that can have a very positive impact on both the prevention and the treatment of cancer. And if we look at the next slice from that infographic, this is looking at cardiovascular diseases or diseases of the heart and blood vessels. We can see from this very recently published study that if you can get to age 50 with normal blood pressure, normal blood fats, be a normal weight, not be diabetic and be a non-smoker, you can anticipate living an extra 10 years over everybody else. It's not all over for you if you've got 50 and those things aren't quite true for you. This study also showed, but I haven't put the slide up, that you can change your life experience trajectory at any point. You can stop smoking at 50 or 60 and still experience considerable improvements in health at that point. Now, St. Augustine made a comment a very long time ago. He said, "Solvitur ambulando," it is solved by walking. And when I think about what would I be prescribing for people to manage these non-communicable diseases, these chronic diseases, to extend your healthy life expectancy, there are no silver bullets. But St. Augustine has made a really good point. We can make a really significant and positive improvement on almost all of those chronic diseases by increasing our walking. And the research is in. Just a few weeks ago, this study came out. Many of you will have heard it reported. Walking is essentially a wonder drug. Just 7,000 steps a day can make these very dramatic reductions. A 47% decreased risk of all-cause mortality. Incredible reductions in risk of cancer, diabetes, dementia. These kind of reductions are way more than you would see in any medication that your GP can prescribe you. Now, before I did public health medicine, I was a general practitioner. And I was working at the top of this triangle in that counselling and education space, seeing people one-to-one. And now as a public health doctor, I'm working in the bottom 2 tiers of this triangle. I'm looking for prescriptions at a community level that will help people to make choices that will improve their healthy life expectancy. So as a GP, I used to prescribe green prescriptions. These are really fantastic. There's a great evidence base for them. They work really well. So I might prescribe to you as an individual that I want you to go walking in the park 3 times a week, and I want you to lift weights in the gym twice a week. That's great for individuals, but what can I do as a public health doctor for communities to help them increase their walking? And so these 2 pictures, they obviously make an extreme example to make the point. We've got the Amish in the picture on the left here who walk 10 to 20,000 steps a day without any special clothes or Fitbits or gyms. And on the left, if you live in Los Angeles, it's going to be almost impossible to get your step count up to 7,000. You must drive to get places on these speedy junction motorways. So as a public health doctor, what I'm thinking about is prescribing the type of urban design that enables people to walk. And there's even a term for it. It's called walkable cities. Here's a study from 2016, and it wasn't about walkable cities. It was looking at the association between income and life expectancy in 4 cities in the United States. And it pretty much as expected, it showed that the better your income, the longer your life expectancy. I absolutely agree with that. But what the study also showed is that in cities, if you look to the left there, the most walkable cities have got a vastly different life expectancy than the least walkable cities. So if you live in New York, which is highly walkable, it doesn't matter what level of income you've got, your life expectancy is going to be better than if you live in Detroit, which is not walkable at all. So we know that walkability increases people's ability to walk, and this is another study that was published in 2016 that showed us exactly what we need to do in cities to make them more walkable. We need to improve residential density and intersection density, increase the number of public transport stops, and make sure that there are plenty of parks within walking distance. And when you do this, each of those factors is significantly, positively, independently, and linearly related to physical activity in the single variable model. So we know what we need to do, and we know how to do it. Now, here's some supporting evidence that just came out a few weeks ago this year. And what it shows is that when people move from a walkable city to a less walkable city, guess what? They don't walk so much. And the pattern is also true when you do it in reverse. So if we put this all together, what we have is walkable cities enable people to walk more, that is, get the daily exercise that they need and that impacts their body's metabolism in good ways so that they're less likely to be diabetic, less likely to have early onset dementia, less likely to have chronic diseases, and to have longer healthy life expectancy throughout their life. Now, coming back to the holiday in Bologna that I and my husband were lucky enough to have earlier this year, my phone presented me with the chart on the left there a few weeks ago. It showed me that I had made a reduction in my steps. And if you look at that, you can see that there's a 3-week period right at the very beginning there where I was taking a lot more steps than normal. And that coincides exactly with the time that I was in Bologna. And so what you can see is that for the 3 weeks that I was away, my husband and I walked everywhere, both within the city and between the cities. And we created a life where walking was our default, where we got around on walking. We didn't even bike, we just walked as it happened. On that holiday, both of us lost weight without really even trying. We were certainly eating well, as I showed you earlier. When we got back to our normal lives here in this country, we started walking less, and not coincidentally, again, we've both put most of that weight back on. So my anecdotal N of 2 experience supports the data in this slide that I showed you. So here's another study that came out again this year. A lot of interesting stuff's come out this year. I've said that as a public health doctor, I want to be able to prescribe walkable cities. This is a study that tracked the smartphones of over 700,000 people in 111 countries around the world. And what it showed is that in more walkable cities, activity is greater throughout the day, throughout the week, across age, gender, and body mass index groups, with the greatest increases in activity found for females. So I want to prescribe walkable cities for communities, if only that was possible. It's going to take everybody here at this conference to do all the things that you're already doing. Living Streets are such amazing advocates for walkable cities. But we're going to need to do it more. We're going to need to take all the information that you're learning at this conference. You're going to need to lobby your MPs, write to your local councillors, write to your city council, talk to your neighbours and your fellow citizens. If we all want to achieve longer, healthy life expectancy for ourselves and for our communities, we really have got to do better at building highly walkable environments. And the problem is not limited just to New Zealand. The World Health Organization regularly monitors trends in physical inactivity. And last year, when they updated their study, they showed that there had been an increase of about 5 percentage points between 2010 and 22 of people who were physically inactive. And if that trend continues, and there's no reason that it shouldn't, about 35% of the world's human population won't be getting even 30 minutes of activity 5 times a week, which I've already discussed is enough to make significant improvements in people's health and well-being. So every move counts. Augustine was right all those centuries ago when he said, "Solvitur ambulando." Walking is the solution to many problems. And I just want to support all of your endeavours in making this the default activity for yourself and for people in your communities. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Anna. And just a reminder to put questions into the Q&A for Anna based on her fantastic talk, and Anna will be here to answer those questions at the end of the session. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and that's Rosie Woods. When we asked Rosie, why does walking matter? Rosie's reply was that walking is an essential part of overall health and well-being. Rosie's involvement in the Geraldine community has grown over the past 17 years and now includes a portfolio of community work which keeps her busy and challenged. She is a board member of the Geraldine Community Board, the Geraldine Licensing Trust, and Geraldine.nz. A large portion of her time is dedicated to the role of project coordinator of the Geraldine Sculpture Trail project, which she describes as a busy, diverse, engaging, and very fulfilling role. We're going to hear more from Rosie now about the Geraldine Sculpture Trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I wanted to springboard really off what Dr. Sue has been saying about how important it is for us all to walk. And we are very fortunate in Geraldine where this particular project, we have a close collaboration with the Timaru District Council. They've been on board right from the word go, major stakeholders and incredibly supportive, right from the mayor down through all the staff, including particularly the Parks Department. This particular project started off about 6.5 years ago, and it was an initiative born out of the community's desire to incorporate art and nature, and a local businessman, Michael Barker, his voice gave life to the project. At the time, the government was releasing funds just post-COVID where we could apply for funding, which we did through Venture Timaru, which is the local promotional board down here for us, for our district. And we were successful in getting a $75,000 grant through that process. So from those initial funds, a design was set up that was through Glasson and Huxtable, the landscape architects based in Christchurch. They came down on site and designed our master plan, which you can see there underneath the lovely cherry blossom tree, is one of our signage, which has our map on it, plus our logo. Each of the trails have a different colour. The whole reason behind this project was not only for an attraction for people to come and spend time in Geraldine, but it was also for our local community's health and well-being. So on any particular day, regardless of the weather, we've got people walking on our trails, walking their dogs, going for an early morning jog, schools using it as part of their cross-country. It is used incredibly highly by all of our local community. Plus, it also encourages people, because we sit beautifully on State Highway 79. So we are the gateway that connects people coming down from Christchurch and then through to the lakes. So like Mount Cook and Lake Tekapo and Pukaki, etc. So we find that Geraldine, being an hour and a half south of Christchurch, we get a lot of people ready for a comfort stop, but we really want to encourage them to spend more time in our town, and also offer them the opportunity to climb out of their cars, not just stop for a comfort break or a pop into Barker's, but to hop onto one of our trails, which actually helps their children, helps unstiffen people who have been sitting in the car for a long time. But while they're walking on the trails, they get to see art. And so our particular trail is obviously all around sculpture. Our focus is now incredibly more into the art world now that we have completed building 3 trails. And that is, all the maintenance of that is now rests with the council. We handed that over to them. There are also 2 hard landscaping elements. One is a boardwalk, which will take people from street level down onto the forest floor. Now, just bear in mind that each of these 3 trails runs through our CBD. So literally people are just mere steps from the CBD into this world of nature. And art, obviously. So the art is adorning, inspirational. People will take away from art their individual thoughts, but it's that connection between what's happening in nature and the marriage between the art. So when I take an artist who's going to propose something for us, it's up to them in conjunction with myself, and then we get approval from TDC just to make sure that their work will sit beautifully within the natural confines that the trails provide. So, for example, we have one particular piece. I'm just going to bring up this particular piece here is by Trevor Askin, and it's called the Nor'wester, and this sits on our domain trail. So this is part of the Geraldine domain. It's our largest walking trail. And this is Trevor's work, which depicts 3 stylized trees in a nor'west wind. Trevor is a local Timaru artist, and we're very, very fortunate to have this as his last piece. He will not be creating anymore. So that's Trevor there. He's on my left, so I'm guessing it's your left too. His lovely wife, Elizabeth's in the centre, and Simon, their son, who also works for Phoenix Engineering. He was the one who helped his dad procure the steel and provided storage for us. Another one of our sculptures is this particular piece here. That's our very first piece. It sits right outside the library, and right across, the trail just runs right beside it. So people, as they're walking to and from the library, they get to enjoy this piece as well as Trevor's work. The beauty of the sculpture trail is that all the pieces of artworks is nothing to do with ratepayer money. Okay, so you may have a query about how are we funding the art. All the art will be funded via individuals or grants. It will never affect ratepayer money. All right, so that's something that sets us apart. The other thing that sets us apart, it's probably unique in New Zealand, is the fact that our trail is free. It is free for everyone to access. There is no entry fee, there's nothing. And it's also anyone who's in a wheelchair, or mums with buggies, or a mobility scooter, for example. We have a lovely lady down here who was being pushed by her daughter, and she's in a wheelchair and she's coming on down our boardwalk. So when one of our most highly objectives, I suppose, would be that these trails are accessible for everybody. It was very important that we maintained that. I'm going to share with you now a video clip. This is a kinetic sculpture, and this kinetic sculpture is an Andrew Drummond, and this is what we are funding for at the moment. I've got over 100,000 for it, but I need another 100. So this particular sculpture, if you could imagine this as being 7 meters high, and I'm just going to see if I can run this for you. So you'll agree that I think people may be interested in coming to visit Geraldine if they have this in their sights. This particular piece, we're looking at placing on our Waihi River Trail, and you'll be able to see the tip of it and parts of it as you drive into Geraldine. It's well off the state highway, but you will be able to grab glimpses of it, and hopefully that will encourage people to stop and to come and explore and to experience for themselves the beauty of this piece. This is another piece. This is also by Andrew Drummond that we are considering. So we're not quite sure whether we will be going with the first one that I showed you or this one. This is a decision that our governance team that will make that decision. So the process of selecting art is done via an art advisory group, which make a recommendation up to our governance team. So all these people that sit in behind me, and I'm very fortunate to be the lead on this project, are all volunteers. So this is something that has been born out of a desire to not just provide a trail for people to walk for their health and well-being, but it's also meeting that mental health need of being inspired by art, or just having the art impact on them as an individual. And I think we may all agree that art is a very individual thing, and how it affects us is usually an incredibly positive thing. Creating conversation with our friends, encouraging other people to come. Hopefully we'll get a lot of, we do have a lot of community pride for this project, and that we see in just daily interactions. I think that's pretty much me. I just really want to reiterate too that without our volunteers, this project would not be what it is, and our fabulous relationship with the Timaru District Council. Without that, this project would not be what it is today. It's just another, you can see the trail just running past here, and these are made of marble and black serpentine that sit along the trail. Another one is the Lockton Lovin, which was inspired through COVID, and it's based on Jack Lovelock's name. He was a Timaru Boys High School attendee for many years, obviously, and he inspired Ian Cheeseman for this because he won the 1500 metre at the Berlin Olympics in 1936. So these are the things that we currently have on the trail. So there are 6 sculptures on one trail, 2 on another, and then we're working on the big Andrew Drummonds, which I'll leave you with that one.
Thanks, Rosie. What a beautiful concept, combining art and walking and the community connections that you talked about as well, with the volunteer involvement and the passion of the community getting behind the work that you've been doing. And I'll certainly be checking that out next time I'm passing through Geraldine, which hopefully isn't too far away. Thank you. Just a reminder, if you've got any questions for Rosie, to pop those in the chat now while it's fresh in your mind. And I'd like to introduce the final speaker for this session, and that is Antonia Malchik. Antonia is going to talk to us about a walking life, walking's role in personal and community well-being. Antonia has written a number of essays and articles for a wide range of publications, and her first book, A Walking Life, is about walking's role in our shared humanity and the damages caused by a car-centric culture. Antonia lives in Northwest Montana, USA, where she's working on a book about ownership and rights on the commons, a newsletter about the commons, private property, commodification, and humanity's relationship with ownership, ecosystems, and one another. Welcome, Antonia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Hopefully you can all see this slide. I am speaking to you from what's called Montana, the traditional homelands of the Salish, Cayuse, Umatilla, Ktunaxa, and Walla Walla peoples. And I'm very honored to be part of the conversations you're having in this program, especially after having listened to your keynote speaker and both Anna and Rosie in this panel. It's a little intimidating, actually. Everyone's got so much research and intelligence. It's really, it's inspiring. I got into writing about walking when my first baby was receiving physical therapy for delayed walking. We lived at that time in a rural area of New York State. The therapist came to our house, and she loved taking my son outside and into our unkempt, bumpy yard full of field grasses, cattails, and milkweed. I didn't understand why she was so enthusiastic about it, and I asked her what the big deal was. She told me a bit about the research between walking on uneven surfaces and children's brain development. A lot of her clients, she said, lived in apartment buildings and never had the opportunity to crawl or walk on surfaces that weren't completely flat. As my kids got older, I began to hear things like this more often from physical and occupational therapists and people who ran local nature programs for kids from New York City. I got really fascinated with what they were telling me about how involved the brain is in walking. When I got my contract for my book, A Walking Life, one of my mentors very generously spent an hour on the phone with me telling me what to expect and plan for, because it was my first book. One of the most useful things he said to me was, take what you believe most about your subject and push at it from every angle you can think of. In my case, that was walking makes us human. And one of the reasons I appreciated his advice is because disability awareness and access issues are so important to me. 2 of my family members moved through the world in wheelchairs, and yet in all the books I'd read on walking, only one had even mentioned disability. The rest skirted the subject. But if bipedal walking is what makes our species human from an evolutionary biology standpoint, if it's what makes us Homo sapiens, then that has implications for disability, which is something that probably all of us will experience at least once in our lives if we live long enough, as Anna so well displayed in her presentation. And I appreciated Rosie's focus on access issues also. I myself had hip surgery just a few weeks ago and will be mobility restricted for some time. So in my book, I define walking as the manifestation of being as fully present as possible in the world for each individual person. That is, how do you personally feel most alive in the world, most connected, most present? How do you access that feeling, and what are the barriers keeping you from doing so? For me, that question often comes back to the other central question in my book: who gets to walk and where? The photo in this slide is from a walk I took in Norwich, England, when I was there for research. I took the photo to share with my book publisher because it felt like an invitation to go for a walk. And to me, it epitomizes the potential of community walkability, or what I call a walking life. Norwich is a city of about 140,000 people, and this path is part of a network running along the river and near the 900-year-old cathedral. It's right near the city center, which is packed with traffic and has a busy passenger train station. and yet it gives almost all the benefits of a hike in the woods: quiet, trees, calm, and the freedom to move. Walking has a long and glorious history among the world's most celebrated intellectuals, philosophers, scientists, musicians, and writers. But the reason I got into the subject isn't because people like these found so much of their inspiration in walking. It's because it has so much to give all of us, no matter who we are or where we live. It's essential to the health of every person and every community. I strongly believe that it's part of being a whole human being. Think about what happens when you take just one step. Not a nice long hike or how you feel going for a walk in general, but simply what your body and brain do to take one step forward. A step involves many microsteps. You begin to balance your body on one foot while your opposite hip and knee act as a pendulum to swing you forward. As you shift, the ball of your foot and your big toe take on the entire weight of your body. That's a tiny surface area to bear all your weight and balance. Any small change, and we wouldn't be able to walk at all, or would have to relearn to do so. Walking, therefore, makes incredible demands on our cognition. While you're taking that step, your body is also having to account for the fact that you're making the movement on a planet that is spinning in space at about 1,600 kilometers per hour. We never think about this consciously, but our brains have to take it into account. Many of you probably know about the vestibular system in your inner ear. That's your balance system. You might have noticed the effects when it fails to work, like if you've ever gotten severe vertigo. Vertigo is the vestibular system being unable to tell your brain where up and down are and how your body's meant to move in relation to them. I've had this experience many times in heavy fog, for example, and the disorientation can last for hours. So when you stand up, your body is relying on that communication between the brain and the inner ear to keep you upright and propelled in the direction you want to go, while it's also busy accounting for obstacles like sidewalk signs, tree roots, other pedestrians, or traffic, along with audio and visual signals. It also has to communicate with the gravitational pull of the planet. Remember, the planet might seem stationary to our eyes, but our bodies know that it's not. So when we take that step, it's estimated that our brain makes over 1 billion calculations for each step. Bipedal walking is the result of millions of years of evolution. The oldest known evidence of obligatory bipedalism in our species ancestors is about 6 million years old, and famous fossils like Dinkinesh, formerly known as Lucy, and Narikotomi boy show evidence of more evolved bipedal walking over those millions of years. It shows that we are reliant on this specific planet and its gravity for something as simple as being able to move without thinking about it consciously. The points on this slide refer to just a few of the many studies of the effects of walking and walkability on attention, energy, cognition, and one of our fastest growing health epidemics, loneliness. Several studies in people over the age of 65, and Anna had more on this subject in her presentation, have found that people who walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, have lower risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. This also goes for depression and anxiety. And although we don't know why walking and brain health are so interlinked, when you think about that billion calculations per second, to me it makes sense. I imagine we'll know a lot more about physical activity and brain health in the near future as this research progresses. But for now, everything we know points to movement being vital to the health of our brains. Much of the research currently being done is for cognitive health in older populations, but there is also a great deal on the links between children's brain development and their need to move. As they learn to walk, a child's hippocampus starts to grow, building a sense of spatial relations like how far away things are, the difference between up and down, relating in complex ways to later learning in reading and mathematics. This photo is of my son and my nephew on a hike on one of our local mountains. They're both all grown up now and have given permission to use these photos. The human body needs to move, both for its physical and mental health, but we don't always have the option. Not only does our modern work life force us to sit for long periods of time, but how we develop residential areas promotes traveling by car rather than by foot. And even when walkability is present, both design choices and policy can frequently make it inaccessible. This is a picture from the home I lived in upstate New York before moving back to Montana, where I'm originally from. We lived on 4 quiet, nature-filled acres. It was beautiful, aside from the ticks and poison ivy. But outside of our yard, we couldn't get to a single place without a car. My son looks pretty happy in this photo, but that bike was never going to get anywhere except up and down the driveway. And the older my kids got, the more isolated and constrained this life felt. All of the land surrounding us was private property, so to go for a walk in the woods, we usually had to drive 45 minutes or more. Being able to walk to anywhere outside our yard would have made a world of difference to the quality of our family life. And the constraints of that life weren't just about physical or individual mental health. We had plenty of nature around us, but no human community. As a young mother, the sense of isolation for me was often acute. Neighbors were few and far between, and during weather events like hurricanes, big snowstorms, and power outages, I had no way to reach out for help. I craved community, often for reasons I was only able to articulate once we'd moved to a walkable town. Walkable communities have much higher rates of civic engagement, lower crime rates, and measurably higher levels of social capital. That is neighborliness, which has been repeatedly shown to result in more resilience in the event of natural disasters such as hurricanes, floods, heat waves, and wildfire. The benefits of being able to walk are huge for children, for families, for people living alone, for older populations, the young, the lonely, the heartbroken, the joyful. It's for everybody. It reduces stress and anxiety. It alleviates depression. It gives movements benefits of improved heart health, circulation, and bone strength, along with general physical fitness and benefits for the brain. And it helps us build social trust, neighborliness, and resilient, connected communities. I'm showing this picture not to plug my book, though my publisher likes that, but because I've always loved what the designer did for the cover. To me, it feels like an invitation to walking in every variation and at all stages and places of life. In countless ways, walking and walkability create our human lives. This photo is of a hike I did with some friends a few years ago. It's called Dawson Pitamakan, and it's in Glacier National Park near where I live in Montana. It's an incredible hike, over 30 kilometers of varied landscape and a lot of wild huckleberries. We had snow and hail on that day because it was midsummer in Montana, and that is what you get. It was marvelous. There is nothing I love more than spending a day like that with some of my closest friends. But all of us have jobs, and all of us are raising children. This is the kind of thing we can only do maybe once a year, and only if we all have childcare on the same day. This is part of why I believe access to a walking life is a fundamental human right. It's in easily accessible nature and the ability to roam right outside our front doors, where we process the depression, joy, heartache, grief, stress, laughter, and intractable problems that make up the richness of our time on this planet. It's where we connect with our communities and their problems and solutions. Walking is truly where we build our lives. Some of the most famous thinkers and creators in our histories knew the benefits of walking, but it's the birthright of everyone, and it's something we should all be able to do, at least theoretically, every day. And I should say that Anna and I did not connect before we did this talk, so I didn't know she was going to use Salvatore Ambulando also. But it's a great line and a great concept. Thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Antonia. That was great. Sorry, apologies. Okay, we're now going to move into our Q&A session. We have got a couple of questions already, but I'm sure there's loads more, so get typing and let's see how many questions we can get. We are scheduled for another 15 minutes for questions, so lots of time. I just want to start off with a question for myself, for all the speakers, anyone can answer. And you've all articulated well the benefits of walking. but we see the reality of people struggling to have opportunities for walking or access to walking. And one of the comments that I often hear from people is that they say they just don't have the time to go walking, or that they've got to get the kids to school and it's not practical to walk the kids to school, or they've got the shopping to do and they've got to, get the shopping home. What sort of comments would you make to people to help them? These are people who want to walk, help them walk more in their daily lives. Rosie.
I actually get asked this question a lot, and I am a walker myself. I walk for an hour every day. And when people say to me, how do you find the time? Because I do have a very busy schedule. I actually say to them that I give up my reading time, which that's a recreational reading time. I choose to listen to an audiobook, and I do that while I'm walking, so that I factor that into my day. And it's actually become a part of my day where I feel that I can choose between either listening to the book or the birds. I'm very fortunate where we live. I live at the bottom of walk up towards the mountain on the way up. But I do encourage them to maybe, because we are good at multitasking, but if they can find one way of incorporating something that they do. Like I'm on the community board and I'm actually in council at the moment, so I've stepped out for this presentation. But one of the things that we do here is that our agendas, which are huge, we can now get them on audio, so that I can still walk and I can read my agenda, but I'm actually doing two things at the same time. So I encourage my fellow councillors and community board members to do the same, because they often struggle with, how can we incorporate all of this work into our daily lives. So that's what I offer.
Right. Anna or Antonia, any comments?
Antonia, you go.
Okay. Well, I think there's different angles of this, like walking itself, it tends to spiral out into bigger conversations. I mean, the biggest one is that it's that classic issue of you can't really come up with individual solutions to systemic problems. And as many people pointed out, our worlds are not built for walkability. And so much of the work comes down to advocating for walkable communities, and you can get into very boring policy wonk stuff. I'm on my town's bike and pedestrian committee, and there is so much nitty-gritty detail in pushing back against car-centric infrastructure. Even a town that promotes walkability, people want to park and people want to drive. And every time you do that, I have to show up and talk about, look, if you widen this road here, this is how much more difficult it makes the kids who live in this part of town to walk to the school in that part of town. And it's a constant and long-term battle of the imagination, almost, to see that we can create communities that are healthier and more sustaining for everybody by making them walkable. And then there's more individual ones. I chose to move back to my hometown, which is a walkable community. I very intentionally created that life for myself and my kids. I wanted them to be able to walk to school. My son started walking to his first job. Not everybody has that opportunity. So, trying to create walkability where you can is important. One of the first programs I ever heard that did what Anna has talked about in her work as a general practitioner was Walk with a Doc in Washington, D.C., where he would give out prescriptions for outdoor time, especially for kids with diagnosed behavioral issues. And what he did was he realized they didn't have access to a park nearby their school or their home. So he would look at their bus routes, and he would find where it would pass a place where they could get off and spend 10 to 20 minutes in a park, being active, being among trees and nature. So things like that are really good. And there's also a program in the US called Girl Trek, which is very much focused on getting women, Black women in particular, in groups walking 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And it's a combination of individual health, kind of collective connection and also community engagement, because you walk around your neighborhoods and you see where there's a sidewalk missing or where there's no access to a playground, and people start doing something about it. It's one of the groups I recommend looking into more than any other, because they do so much and they do it pretty quietly, and I'm always amazed by what they're able to accomplish.
Thank you. Anna, any add-on comments?
Yeah. I think the reason that I put in the quote from St. Augustine, it is solved by walking, but I also prefaced it with there are no silver bullets. And we all of us, as in our various cultures around the world, we have created lives where it's actually very hard to do all the things that we need to do. So one of those studies that I referenced talked about when you can make a city really walkable. The people who often walk more, the observable difference is in women. And I would say that's probably young mothers. The kind of lives and cities that we've created mean that women do still tend to do most of the childcare. And they also are responsible for the supermarket shopping and for visiting the grandparents wherever they live, and for picking the kids up when something goes bad at school and all the rest of it. And the only way they can do that in the cities that we've designed is to have a car. And, that's just one example of how hard we've made it for people. Even if they want to walk, we've created these environments where it's really difficult for them to walk. So just picking up on Alex Dyer, who's put in quite a few questions in the comments. He strikes me as someone who probably knows the answers to his questions. But one of the things that I've done with my team in the public health unit here in Waitaha over the last few years is we have developed really strong relationships with the transport planners in our city council and in our regional council, and they invite us pretty regularly when they're developing their new big strategic plans, their transport plans, to come in and work with them on what we call health impact assessments. And so we are able to work with them sometimes at a very high level to say, well, we think you haven't prioritised accessibility enough, or we think you're not taking enough regard of the likely health outcomes, good or bad, of whatever decisions you've made. So that often by the time the plan goes out for consultation, a lot of the public health stuff that we want is already in the plan. That's kind of an ideal. But we also have worked with Lucy Saunders, who I'm sure has presented at this conference before, or many of you will know, who's based in the UK and has a Healthy Streets program. And that's very much about the detail of what's required to help people to walk. And we've developed a Healthy Streets group in Waitaha and have a lot of community representation there and various councils. So we're trying to approach it from all angles to do the best that we can to retrofit our cities. But retrofitting is never as good as starting from the beginning. And the data that I was presenting was really trying to make the case that this is something that we have to do because we can't afford not to anymore. Just the health consequences alone, apart from all the other things that Rosie talked about, the cultural and the social well-being, and there's so many benefits to walking in so many sectors, but just the disease consequences mean that we've got to start prioritising this in our urban planning.
Thanks, Anna. I think that's in response to the question that Alex posed about how to break down siloed thinking between health and transport. And in our public service, and particularly in politics, transport policy is health policy.
Yes, absolutely. Totally agree.
I just want to reflect on my own experience living on Napier Hill when I was a young mum with a pram, and there's some beautiful walking areas, a lot of investment in trails in Napier, but if you live on the hill, you have to get off the hill to get down to those paths, and there's no pavements on many of the roads on the hill. So you're literally walking on the roads with cars zooming past at speed down the hill in order to get to the paths. So the connections are also really important. The next question is for you, Rosie. You talked about the sculpture trials as a draw for tourists to Geraldine, but how has the Geraldine community responded to the trials?
Well, the Geraldine community get the benefit of using the trails on a daily basis, and in particular, when you think of the social connectivity, one of the trails actually runs, because we have a river running through Geraldine, the trail actually goes around the, like a whole loop, incorporating the river with a footbridge and the main road bridge coming into town. So it actually helps to bring communities together through the trail, because it connects one side of the town to the other. So we find that it's we get a lot of very positive response. I think the biggest thing that people have, when we started placing art, there was a little pushback because they felt that we were using ratepayer money, which we do not at all. In fact, when I think of the investment that the Timaru District Council have made into Geraldine, it just shows a massive support for our community from our council, and the investment just it's just amazing. The people that come to enjoy it, they come to Barkers or any of the lovely cafes in town, and they can just hop straight on it. So yeah, I hope that's answered the question well for you.
So the community are using it as part of their transportation, from what you said, and sort of connecting up the town. What distances are the trails?
So all the trails, on like that map that I showed you with the lovely cherry tree, on each of the trails where we have those big maps, it actually gives the distance, which is like a like dock workout. You do the meterage, and they'll tell you how long it takes. So one of the trails is just 10 minutes, which is our smallest one that just goes around our rhododendron dell. And then the larger one is probably 25 minutes. And then the biggest one, which is around the domain, is probably about 40 minutes. So people can actually choose which one is going to suit their needs.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Alex is a very active questioner, so I'm going to pick up one of the other questions from Alex, and I think it was a question that was posed in the keynote as well. This is a question framed for you, Anna, but anyone please answer. It's about smoking. So what potential do you see for approaching these challenges in a similar way to how we tackle the smoking epidemic? I believe that while we have good and improving appreciation and proof of the benefits of walkable cities, we don't have nearly enough direct challenge to private cars and their business activities.
So I'll just make a quick comment about that. Smoking, it was many decades before smoking was realised as not a great thing for people's health and well-being. I'm sure you've all seen advertisements from the 1950s of doctors advertising their preferred brand of Camel cigarette or whatever to patients with coughs. So it can take a while for evidence of harm to come through. The difference between private cars and cigarettes is that cigarettes are pretty unequivocally bad for people, whereas cars offer a lot of benefits. And I think it's really important not to minimise that, especially in the environments that we've created. I mean, I would, be lovely for me to step out and go and walk in Rosie's path down in Geraldine, but it's an hour and a half in a car for me to get to Geraldine. I don't have any other way of getting to Geraldine at the moment. And I don't have any other way of doing, many of my activities other than taking a car. And similarly, Alex's other question about accessibility really points to this too. We need to get much better at positioning cars as the tool that is required for certain people at certain times of our lives. And that will be all of us at certain times of our lives. But the rest of the time, we need to be able to create the environments where it's possible for us to walk and bike and feel comfortable doing it. And I don't think we're good enough at that yet. So in terms of smoking, we had action at an international level, at a national level, at a legislative level, in the social media, personal level, education. We had action at every single space and setting that a person would find themselves in. And it would be great to be doing that for private cars as well. But it is going to be a much more nuanced it needs to be a much more nuanced discussion because cars can be good.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to wrap that up. That can be your final comment for this session.
No.
Anna.
Walking solves everything.
The emphasis is on can. But I'd just like to thank our three speakers for their great presentations, great thought-provoking ideas. We are now going to have a break for lunch for those of you in New Zealand, for morning tea for me in Australia. Our next session starts at 1:05 with a keynote address from Dr. Eva Keeley. I recommend that you all get out and have a walk, and hopefully the weather is kind wherever you are to enable you to do that. I'm certainly going to get up and have a stretch and a walk around before we meet again. So thanks everyone. Thanks for the attendees as well, and great questions. Thank you.
I'll be signing off, so I'm afraid I have this other commitment to go to. So thank you everyone for the collaborative effort. It's been amazing to be a part of, and thank you.
Great. Thanks, Rosie. Definitely going to come to Geraldine.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.